And welcome back to the show. Many New Yorkers are still feeling the effects and the impact and loss of life due to Hurricane Ida. Citizens NYC is here not only to help New Yorkers get back on their feet during this time of crisis, but also to amplify their voices as they develop solutions to combat these issues that will no doubt have to be dealt with in the future. Joining us to share more details is the Communications and Public Affairs Director at Citizens Community for New York City, Paige Travis. And Paige, glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having us. This is great. Thank you.
It is great. And I know that following Hurricane Ida, there was a survey that was actually conducted to really go into finding some more details. Share with us a little bit about what the survey actually entailed.
That's exactly right. So we operate in times of crisis. We were born out of crisis in the 1970s. And so this is what we do. And so the morning after the hurricane, our CEO said, okay, we have 15,000 folks in New York City who run community-led projects, and we need to know what they're doing, what they're seeing. These are grassroots leaders. And so we sent out a mass text and really just said, hey, are you guys okay? The morning after the hurricane, I mean, even our staff, we were all checking on one another. So it was kind of a scary time, each borough was different. The effects of the hurricane was different. And so we sent out the blast just to see how folks were doing, what resources they had or they needed. And we got about 200 responses back within, the first 4 or 5 days. And that was impressive for us because it means these are grassroots folks on the ground that are saying, hey, you're willing to listen to us. There's a lot happening.
Right. And when we talk about a lot happening, I think that for us, it was unprecedented in seeing what happened with Ida. The fact that we had to deal with torrential rains, and not just torrential rains, but also excessive flooding. Give me a little bit about the excessive flooding, because we know that this was something that we never saw before, where we saw the warning that New York and a tornado warning, not really in a hurricane warning. It really just became a real scary situation.
It was historic. It was definitely historic. So that was the number one bit of feedback that we got, was the flooding was excessive. I was talking to Senator Comrie out in Queens, and in his district alone, he lost 2 people, and he lost 2 people in their basements. And so the flooding is a real issue. I mean, the majority of folks are saying a lot of it points to infrastructure, the need to really address what's going on with infrastructure in New York City, what needs to be updated, overdevelopment, what needs to be looked at a bit closer, because climate change is here. And that's what this showed us. The survey made it very clear that folks are looking to understand, how do we address climate change now?
We looked and saw subway stations that actually were so impacted with flooding, water literally gurging down all the way into the tracks and really flooding walkways. What can you tell us about public transportation?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, a lot of folks lost access to transportation, whether if it was trying to get home that day. I mean, folks that live in New York City, if you're on social media, or even if you watch the news, you saw the water flooding the subway stations. I mean, it was kind of a scary sight. And so I think folks are just saying, hey, we not only can't get out of the city, but then days later, how do we get back into the city? How are we working? So in conjunction with the loss of access to transportation, folks are saying we need to better understand communication, emergency communication. If transportation is down, do I need to be at my job? So they were saying, a lot of folks were saying they need to better understand, what actions to take when these emergency situations happen. If transportation is down, how are we communicating that to the people?
Right. And connecting people with relief. I mean, obviously, many people never thought this would actually happen to them, but yet and still they find themselves in a place, flooding, lack of electricity, lack of access to public transportation. How are you going about connecting people with the relief needed, especially during a time like this?
Yes, exactly right. I mean, we're definitely in this moment where we're just assessing impacts. We've been talking to elected officials and just letting them know these are the needs that folks are saying is very real, that folks are dealing with. And it's interesting because the impact really did vary based on which borough, you came from. We saw a lot of responses from Queens and the Bronx, especially this time around, Brooklyn as well. But even folks in Dumbo were saying, hey, for instance, my sink and toilet never floods like this. And it was flooding even in Dumbo. So it's just something to take note of and really just start having a conversation around, okay, what do we do next? This has happened once, we've had some loss. Let's talk about solutions now.
Yeah. And as you're getting these responses back, obviously they vary by borough and across the city. But is there anything in particular that really stood out to you as you started to unpack these these responses?
It's a good question. Generally speaking, folks were stranded, and I'm just thinking back to Senator Comrie saying the infrastructure in his district. Infrastructure was the number one bit of feedback that we're getting. Is so old that the sewers were overflooding. Like they were getting backwater from the sewers. And that's not pretty in New York City. And even after, the water dissipated, there was a ton of trash everywhere. So we're just hearing that we really need to talk about infrastructure. And even on the national debate, the president has talked about maybe looking at infrastructure as a means for driving economic opportunity. So it's a conversation that we really should look at closely. It's not the first time that a hurricane has hit New York City. It's not going to be the last time.
Right. What was the big difference for you between Sandy and like this right here?
So some folks were saying 9 years after Hurricane Sandy, the area, even the projects in the Lower East Side, nothing has really been improved in that area. So folks were saying after Hurricane Sandy, the public housing there, folks were asking for there to be some dams put up for there to be some protection put up there. And 9 years later, nothing's happened. So even now, and this was about a week ago when we got responses and kind of started to document them, there was still stains on the wall from water residue. So really the same thing is happening. It's like the lessons learned after Sandy were kind of like, oh, this happened, and then no actions were actually taken for the now.
Yeah. What about electricity? Because I know that was huge. A lot of people experienced power outages. Were a lot of people who were giving you your responses really speaking to the electricity issue?
It's true. It's true. Electricity in particular, folks were saying because power were down, it really impacted their ability to communicate. So letting people know that they were safe, but also getting a sense of if it was safe to go out and about. But some people did lose electricity for up to 3 days.
Wow. And so for people who want to get connected and find out more to how to be connected to what you do, what do they do?
Yeah, so we're at a moment here at Citizens Committee for New York City where we're relaunching our grant application process. What we do is we award grants throughout the city to everyday New Yorkers. These are people who may have been impacted by Ida and they want to do something in their community. They can apply for a grant through our All in Neighborhood grant program. We award up to $10,000 to everyday people who say, hey, I have an idea. And so we invite you to follow us. We invite you to apply. Applications open up this November. And then we're also hosting an ideas summit in October. So we'll have elected officials. For instance, State Senator Liz Kruger will be there. Haitian Times media will be there. Really having a real conversation. Our grantee partners will also be there about what solutions look like. Tell us from a grassroots leader standpoint what you're seeing on the ground, and let's talk through the issues. So that's happening on Tuesday, October 12th.
All righty. Well, Paige, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for sharing good work that Citizens NYC is doing to really capture the pulse of New Yorkers. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know if you want more information, please don't hesitate to visit the website at citizensnyc.org and then on Facebook and Twitter at Citizens NYC. Thanks to Paige for being with us. We got more show. Don't go anywhere. Open continues coming up right after this.